In less than 10 minutes, I'm going to cut through all of the moral chaos surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian issue, using moral philosophy, but only the principles from it that are nearly universally agreed upon, that and international law that almost every country has signed on to. After that, I'm going to present a case for transgender Stoicism. Stick around and see what that's about. We're going to analyze the Snow White versus Snow person of color debate, that and much more today on the Unsafe Media Podcast. Public school has made us all immeasurably dumber than we would have been in countless ways, but probably the most egregious of its blunders was getting rid of the softer and more elevated sciences like moral philosophy. In the divorce between the sciences, math got the kids and moral philosophy got the one-bedroom apartment and microwavable dinners known as cable television. On these programs, which people like you and I depend upon to be able to form coherent opinions about what's happening in the world, not only are facts simply omitted or ripped entirely out of their contexts, they're then analyzed by people who are just as hopelessly miseducated as you and I. It truly is the blind leading the blind. But thankfully, the solution is not that far away. The internet has made all of the classic writings of the most brilliant minds of the last several millennia accessible to us for free. One such insight is the doctrine of double effect. It was first introduced by St. Thomas Aquinas, who was defending of all things self-defense. And he said that while it would be wrong to intentionally try to kill somebody who is attacking you, if their death is the unintended consequence of you defending yourself, it's still morally permissive to do just that. The death of the aggressor would be considered the double or the secondary effect. Reflecting on this insight has given us the ability to sort of lay out a series of tests to determine if an action is permissible even if it has a foreseen negative consequence. Let's go ahead and look over these standards and see how Israel and Hamas measure up. Number one, in order for your action to be permissible, even if it has a foreseen negative consequence, number one, the act has to be either morally good or at least morally indifferent. It is a positive moral good for Israel to attack the terrorists who are intentionally murdering and slaughtering and raping and kidnapping their people. Number two, the agent may not positively will the bad effect. The bad effect, or the double effect, will be that civilians in Gaza will almost certainly, no, they will certainly die, and they have died in this conflict. That's the foreseen double effect. But is that what is intended? No, it is not. They are not positively intending that. In fact, continuing on, if you can obtain the good effect without the bad effect, you should do so. We see Israel doing exactly that whenever they drop knock bombs. If you haven't ever seen it, here the building on the right is going to receive a knock bomb. Shakes the whole building, and then they give them several minutes to get out. Then several minutes later, once the civilians have had time to get out, but the terrorists have not had time to move all their military installation, they drop the actual rocket, thus blowing up the military installation while preserving the life of as many civilians as possible. How about Hamas? Well, they fail this test again because they are positively willing the bad effect. They're not accidentally killing Israeli civilians, they are intentionally targeting them, and not just for random indiscriminate bombings. They frequently use rape, torture, and kidnap as a means by which to terrorize the Israeli civilians. They are intending the evil. Far from attaining their good end without the bad effect, they are exclusively aiming at the bad effect. Number three, the good effect must flow from the action at least as immediately as the bad effect. What that means is that you can't intentionally do something evil to produce something good. The evil action must be simply a consequence of you pursuing good. And of course, again, when we see civilians die in Gaza, that's exactly what's happening. The Israelis are over and over and over again attacking military installations, unintending, not desiring the death of the civilian, and that's simply a negative side effect. And the opposite is true of Hamas. And number four, the good effect must be sufficiently desirable to compensate for allowing the bad effect. Protecting your own civilians is absolutely proportionate to the amount of force that they use. Now you may say, well, they're actually freedom fighters. That's obviously untrue. None of their actions are aimed at liberation. They're not attacking the military. They're not attacking the Israeli government. They're only attacking civilians. Their aims are exclusively terroristic. They are exclusively evil. Now that makes it perfectly clear. One side is evil, one side is not. But it actually gets even worse because what you realize is that the civilian deaths that are on the hands of Israel because of the double effect, they're not actually on Israel. They're on Hamas. They're only there because Hamas is intentionally endangering them. And according to international law, they are the ones to blame. Let's look here at the International Criminal Court. Pursuant to Article 82B23 from 1998, utilizing the presence of civilians to shield your military forces and to make them immune from military operations constitutes a war crime in international armed conflicts. It is exclusively Hamas's fault. They are the war criminals. Every time you see a Palestinian killed, know that it is because they intentionally placed those civilians near their military installations or their military installations near their civilians. And of course, that principle has been reiterated over and over again. Geneva Convention number 3, no prisoner of war at any time is to be sent or detained near areas of fire near the combat zone, nor may their presence be used to render certain points or areas immune from military operations. According to Geneva 4, the presence of protected persons, that's POWs and civilians, may not be used to render certain points immune to military operations. Again, from Additional Protocol number 1 from 1977, under no circumstance shall medical units be used in an attempt to shield military objectives from attack. Whenever possible, the parties to the conflict shall ensure the medical units are so sited that attacks against military objectives do not imperil their safety. Remember about a week ago when everybody was debating whether or not Israel or Palestine were the ones who bombed that hospital? It is exclusively the responsibility of Hamas to protect their hospitals by moving all of their military installations as far away as humanly possible. They do the exact opposite. They intentionally place them in and around vulnerable civilian populations, not because they're trying to hide or protect their military installations, but because they know that whenever their civilians die, it is bad for Israel on the international stage. Whether you look at it morally or legally, there's obviously an evil side and there is obviously a righteous side. That to say, we're grown-ups. We know that that doesn't mean everything Israel does is good. When they destroyed that pizza parlor the other day, just because it was owned by one of the more wicked, evil Nazis you can possibly imagine, I'm certain that that action did not fall within the confines of the law of double effect. And so that means that we should, as much as humanly possible, avoid war. And therefore, we should reserve a special level of disdain and condemnation for those who incur war with wanton abandon. And spoiler warning, that's Hamas again. All right, that was pretty heavy. Let's move on to something a little lighter. Snow Brown and the one dwarf and the 6 non-dwarves created quite a stir whenever the casting was announced. Not simply because the original story no less than 4 times describes her as white as snow, red as blood, and black-haired as ebony, but because whenever they do this, whenever they swap a white character for a non-white actor, we know that they're doing so because they're prioritizing a brand new ideology that prioritizes racial consciousness over meritocracy. And of course, those of us with that kind of concern felt incredibly justified whenever the main actress opened her mouth and talked about the original story. She characterized it as a helpless woman being saved by her stalker.
You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
And because of that, the Daily Wire threw their hat in the ring. They're now producing their own version of the tale themselves. The left will assume that this is some sort of white identitarian backlash, and that simply isn't even close to true. It all comes down to ideology, not skin color. The original tale told a story of how destructive to the soul it is to become exceedingly vain, the power of inner beauty, and the importance of true love in overcoming our and redeeming us from our imprudent decisions. The original story put a heavy emphasis on the importance of taking care of a home and how beautiful and elevating that work is. The dwarves found her sleeping in their house and they're amazed by her beauty. When she wakes up, they tell her she can stay with them if you keep house for us, you cook, make beds, wash, sew, knit, keep everything clean and orderly, then you can stay with us. And I love this last line here. You shall have everything you want. Very much like a marriage proposal. And that's actually how Snow White takes it. She says, yes, with all my heart. And Rachel Zegler says that's not at all what this new movie is about. Rather, it's about the princess daydreaming, about wielding the levers of power over nations. You know, something that is an important message for all little children everywhere.
She's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Snow White is running for president.
I'm launching my campaign. It's an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self.
Again, if the story was about an African princess named Wood Brown and it extolled the same virtues and had the same cultural impact that Snow White did, and then they replaced that princess with a slovenly fat SJW with blue hair and it extolled the virtues of challenging the patriarchy and traditional beauty standards, we would have the exact same problem because it's not the skin color of the actor or the actress. It's the changing ideology. All right, let's jump into some rapid responses. Tim Pool tweeted out, "This woman is correct." Let's listen to what she has to say.
What's the most a man should spend on a first date?
I feel like if I'm gonna get ready and I'm gonna use all my products to come out with you, I need like a minimum of $200. A minimum, and that's like being nice.
And what does the man get in return for that?
My presence?
What, aren't you having his presence within you already?
I hear you, but no. No. I mean, like, I'm here to get to know you. I'm here to get to know you. You invited me out.
But he has to drop $200.
Yeah. Because
minimum.
Yeah. Because
just because you have to do your makeup?
Because I have to. Okay, so we're gonna do the math. My moisturizer is $400. My eye cream is $300. My serum is like another $300. My makeup, not included. So if I have to spend, that's my money. I'm spending my money on these products. I'm gonna use these products.
What are you using them for, though?
For myself.
Okay.
But I'm gonna use these products and I'm gonna show up because it's not like I'm gonna show up in sweats.
The man doesn't owe you anything if you're just getting to know each other.
If you're inviting me out, you owe me a date.
Technically speaking, what she's saying is not entirely wrong. Of course, her mathematics about how much her cosmetic costs, that's wildly off. But she's correct in the sense that when a man asks you out, he is pursuing you, he's trying to win you over, and therefore he should be bringing his A game. So why is it that she's so insufferable to listen to? Why is it so difficult to agree with her? After I watched the video, I asked my wife, I said, "Hey, what do you think, unsafe wife? How much should a man spend on a first date?" And she said, "Well, keep in mind, they're in their 20s, so he's probably not going to have a whole lot of money because they should be getting married earlier on." And then she said this, and it was so clear that I just said, "Okay, text that to me. I want to read it out on my next episode." She says, "It's not about an amount. It should be sacrificial. It's about the heart motive toward her. She should know him enough to know that he is a hard worker, a good man, and that whatever he is spending is generous. She should also have a grateful and not a greedy heart, appreciating his sacrifice regardless of the amount." My wife, based as ever, and that's absolutely the case. The fact of the matter is you're dating to show that you would make a good husband and that she would make a good wife. If he becomes your husband one day, he's essentially showing you that he can be the proverbial king. He can be the head of the household. He will literally be the provider and the protector, and the woman should be showing that she will make a good wife. And for a man to be that kind of a man, he needs a woman who is appreciative, respectful, humble, loving, supportive, and she doesn't represent any of that in the video. That's why she comes across, while saying something close to true, why she comes across so insufferable.
Strikes me as pretty insensitive.
Does my outfit make you mad?
No, good.
Good?
Yeah.
Do you have to be Chinese to wear this?
You don't have to. Anybody can wear.
Will, what prompted you to make that video?
Well, really, I made that video to prove anti-white ivory tower professors like the one in your studio wrong. I mean, this video and the others that I've made like it with Native Americans, with Mexicans, with the Chinese you just watched are irrefutable evidence that people like that professor are exactly wrong on cultural appropriation.
It is, in fact, ivory tower nonsense to talk about cultural appropriation, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have real-world consequences. 20 years ago, when asked about the relationship between white and black people, black adults, 8% of them said that it was very good, 62% said somewhat good. Today, it's the exact opposite. Nearly 70% of black adults say that the relationship between whites and blacks is either bad or very bad. And this all can be traced back to the popularization of certain ideas like cultural appropriation. All right, let's move on to our last segment, wisdom and virtue. You may have seen this clip go absolutely viral about a week ago.
You have to say to the trans students on this campus who feel actively victimized by your presence here?
Life's tough. Get a helmet, man. I'm too pregnant for this. Next question.
Whether you're transgender or not, you do in fact need a helmet because life is going to be tough and you're going to be insulted. The question is, do you have any form of protection against it? Seneca, where everything from this meditation will be coming from his On the Firmness of the wise person. He says, "There's nothing on earth so sacred as not to be liable to sacrilege. Yet holy things exist on high nonetheless, because they're men who strike out against them." Remember the precise language of her question. She says, "What do you say to those who are victimized by your presence?" That means there are full-grown adults within a quarter-mile distance that are quite literally being harmed just by her proximity. And why is that? Is it because she is, emanating some sort of ionizing radiation? It's simply because she disagrees with them. No matter who you are, again, trans or not, you should do everything in your power to not let that be a true statement about you. If that is true of you, it admits a very serious character flaw. It says that you are basing your well-being on the opinions of fools. Remember, if you're transgender, you are the one who is making the claim that you're the enlightened one. You're the one who understands human nature as it truly is. Candace Owens, she's the idiot. She's the rube who thinks that biology determines sex and gender. She's the idiot who doesn't know that men can get pregnant. Let me put it another way. You are actively being harmed by the fact that a person whose opinion you disregard does not regard you with a high opinion. You're quite literally valuing that which you consider to be valueless so highly that it's injuring you. And this is where Seneca says the wise man has the advantage. The wise man has the unique advantage of being safe from injury. He literally says the wise man can suffer no insult. It is impossible. He says from chapter 2, the wise man can neither receive insult or injury. And he repeats this several different times, but the question is how? And the Stoics would say it is to remove your hope from fortune. It's to remove your hope from the opinions of fools. It's to place your hope in that which is certain, in that which cannot be changed. So at a very bare minimum, reject the desire to be rightly judged by those whose judgment you think is skewed. And of course, this goes with the red-pilled as well. Let's say that you don't believe in John Money's theory about gender. In fact, let's say you've read into John Money a little bit and you became convinced that he was almost certainly an abuse victim himself that developed a deep disdain for his own male anatomy, and that he then, out of this dysphoria, formulated an idea that was equal parts immoral and ascientific. And that the results of this ideology were not just disastrous for himself and his direct patients, but to basically anybody who adopts it, even those who don't have gender dysphoria. Now, if that describes you, why would you care if somebody called you transphobic? If you believed that the best way to help somebody was through cognitive behavioral therapy as opposed to mutilating surgery, why would you care if somebody falsely said that you're being unloving or a bigot? Salma Hayek actually made a really good point, the actress. She made a great point. She said, if somebody insults me in a language I don't know, I can tell from the context that they're upset, but it doesn't land. I don't know what they're saying. I place no value in that collection of syllables. In the same way, we can do that with those who throw around epithets and slurs like they're candy. I can just place no value in it. Those particular syllables mean nothing to me. Now, you may say, but it lands close to home when someone insults me. It feels, if it's close to true, it really hits me in the feels. But in this case, the injury should be used more like a surgery. Let it be a biopsy. If it's revealing something that hurts, then it gives you the opportunity to remove it from yourself. I don't know if you've noticed, but a few people have pointed out online that my hairline is starting to recede. Now, if somebody points out that I'm bald and I cry over it, then it means that I've placed my hope in having hair, right? And so all I have to do is remove my hope from ever having hair. That's not going to happen. That is fortune. Fortune gives and fortune takes away. God, in his providence, did not see fit that I should have hair all the days of my life. And therefore, I need to love my fate. I must love the providence of God and say, you know what? That actually isn't what is required for happiness. I shouldn't place my vain hope there. Let's say they criticize one of your beliefs. Well, all that shows is that you lack confidence in it. You don't believe that you have all the argumentation and evidence needed. And so, first, temper your claims. Well, instead of saying, I know for certain it is this way, simply say, yeah, I think it might be this way. I'm kind of leaning this way because of the evidence. I'm still looking into it. And then, whenever they say, you're wrong, it takes away all the teeth. I didn't say I held that position. I'm saying I'm looking into it. And then whenever you find the evidence and the arguments that either confirm or change your position, then you can come back. And when they say that you're wrong, you won't feel that same level of anxiety or misery. You won't feel insulted when they call you stupid, because you'll know that you're right. I actually want to conclude with probably my favorite quote from this entire book of his. And it will really help encapsulate exactly the manner in which we should reply and respond to those who insult us erroneously. He says that, when somebody disrespects us, that the person who responds to the disrespect, he says, I can call this nothing but whinings and a queasy spirit. These matters chiefly affect the luxuriously nurtured and prosperous, for those who are pressed by worse evils have no time to notice such things as these. If you're upset by disrespect, it means that you're so deeply privileged that you can't even recognize how privileged you are. It's because they are excessively idle. Their disposition is naturally weak and womanish. He therefore, who is affected by insults, shows that he possesses neither sense nor trustfulness, for he considers it certain that he is scorned, and that the vexation affects him with a certain sense of degradation. Whereas the wise man is scorned by no one, for he knows his own greatness, gives himself to understand that he allows no one to have such power over him. He either takes no notice of these insults, or considers them to deserve to be laughed at. That's it for today. Please consider joining the Patreon. If you're the kind of person who has not joined the Patreon, you're probably also the kind of person who is deeply offended when Seneca used the word womanish. Kind of proving his point, I think. That'll do it for today. Like, share, subscribe. It really boosts the algorithm. Until next time, I'm reminding you, trust in God and keep your powder dry.